Good morning. It's good to be with you. All this, give an update before I forget. One is that we have prayer cards on the back podium. I don't know if that's where the bulletins are, but there's a podium out back that you can grab a prayer card. So those are there. And then I had something else and it slipped my mind here. So let me introduce everyone that is with us this morning. You can see, if you can read the names from that far away, you see the family with us. We are blessed to have everyone with us right now. Well, that's not always the case, but we have our whole family. So my wife, Irena, I don't know if you can't see the family in the row, so we'll refer to the picture, I guess. Irena and I celebrated 22 years of marriage this last August, and God has given us 6 daughters, and they are all here with us. Eva is our oldest. See, I got to look at the picture to see who's who. Eva's on the end over here, and then next to her is our youngest, Isabella. Annika is the one right next to Irena, and then you have Audra, Eden, and Ivy. So we'll have a test at the end too, right? Here's the other housekeeping thing. I wanted to mention about questions just once again. I know sometimes the missionary goes on, and you're just kind of processing everything. You get to the end, and you say, are there any questions? You're like, I forgot what my question was. So I'll just kind of say that again, kind of make a mental note. If something comes up somewhere along the way, just note that in the back of your brain, write it down or whatever. And Lord willing, we'll be able to answer questions here at the end. So let me kind of give a little update about where we've come from. We came back into the States in mid-July, just in time for graduation, for a couple of the girls from Word of Life Bible Institute in Florida. Audra was finishing her first year down there, and Eva was down there finishing summer ministry after her second year. Oh, sorry, I got to back up a second. I forgot to introduce the non-Doyle. So I got to back up here. So we have, speaking of Eva, this is Eva's boyfriend, Emmanuel, Dame. He has also gone through two years at the Bible Institute, right? His family were missionaries in France for about 10 years, I think. And they're back in Florida serving at a church near Tampa. So he's currently ministering with Word of Life on a music team. So they're traveling all over the place, all over the U.S., and I think going overseas at some point too again, right? So he's up here for the week, for this week after Christmas through New Year to visit Eva. So we're happy to have him here. All right, so we had graduation, and then we went up to New York for Annika's graduation from Word of Life Bible Institute up there. And you can see this always sparks some interest as well. In the lower right-hand picture, you see a couple of dogs. Those are Ecuadorian dogs. Nothing special. They don't speak another language or anything like that. They speak English, in fact, or they respond to the commands in English. But we brought those dogs back from Ecuador. We were able to pay a company, and they took care of all the paperwork, and they came back with us. So we're thankful to have them. We are currently staying near Marilla, New York. Colesville is a little town. Colesville Baptist Church has a parsonage that has allowed us to stay there, and so we have gotten all of it. I don't know if you guys have more snow right now than we do, because it was warmer the last couple of days up near us, and then raining overnight or whatever, or yesterday. So you have more snow right now, but we've had a few storms that's made life interesting to try to get the driveway shoveled out and things that we're not used to in Ecuador, right? Okay, let me, before we get into more pictures and stuff, I want to put up a word for definition. The word missionary, right? Who can give me just your definition? It doesn't have to be like the dictionary definition of missionary, but what comes to mind when you think of the word missionary? A messenger. That's a pretty biblical definition, right? What else? Someone who spreads the gospel. Anybody else? Stab at it. Come on. Okay, someone with a mission, someone has a goal. Yeah, those are all good things. All right, well, let me share with you, when we first went to Nicaragua, that was our first country that we went to and serving overseas, this was the definition that we realized that Nicaraguans understood. You can see it on the screen. They understood missions or missionary as a gringo that comes to my country, right? It's North Americans sending missionaries, and as Nicaraguans, we receive. And this is true. This has been true in Ecuador as well. Is there a better place to? Am I rubbing on something here? I don't know if it's the wire or. It'll be annoying for people who are trying to hear online or something. All right, that sounds like it's working that way, right? So missionary, or the word missionary was typically kind of just understood in that context as someone who comes to my country. It's about receiving rather than sending, right? But the idea of missions is really of being sent out, or a missionary is one who is sent out, right? That's the concept that we understand from the North American church, is we send missionaries, okay? There's someone else that might say that someone who travels cross-culturally to spread the gospel. We think of Paul doing that in the New Testament, right? Of his 3 missionary journeys of going different places that were not his home. We're going to look at this a little bit more in the next hour. But then you have this definition of a missionary as a qualified Christian sent out under the authority of a local church to an area of recognized need in order to pursue the work of the Great Commission. That's kind of an all-encompassing definition of missions. So we have this kind of tension of the definition of missionary, of one who is sent versus one who arrives or comes, right? Or one who we receive versus one who is sent or one who goes. And so this has been something that we have pursued to change this mindset, this philosophy in both Nicaragua and Costa Rica, in Central America, Ecuador, in South America, over the last several years. That is the responsibility of the church in any country, of every believer, every church, every country in the world, to participate in the Great Commission. It's not just for, we wouldn't say it's just for Sherman First Baptist Church to send missionaries, right? Or support missionaries, or to help in that sending process, but also in the surrounding towns, the state, the country. We participate in this globally to send missionaries internationally with the gospel, right? And so this has been something that we have worked on over the last several years in Latin America, to change this mindset of not just receiving missionaries, but actually equipping and sending. So with that said, let me introduce our mission that we are with. It's called Servant Leaders International, and our mission is, or why we exist, is to partner with the local church to mentor, mobilize, and multiply its ministry and leadership potential. So we come alongside local churches, primarily in Latin America. That's been our main focus. There's also missionaries in Europe, but our focus has been in Latin America, to come alongside local churches to help equip their people, mobilize them into local church ministry, and eventually see that church multiplied out by sending church planters or even international missionaries. So that's what we're going to look at in some of these pictures this morning. Let me keep on going here just for time's sake. So you saw those 3 words, to mentor, mobilize, and multiply, right? So let me focus on this for a second. The idea of mentor is we want to help the church in equipping someone has a call or a desire to go into ministry or missions. What's next? And often what we do is we outsource that. Like my experience was, I went away to a Bible Institute. Church kind of outsources that to other venues. But primarily it's the responsibility of the church to equip their people. So we come alongside the local church in Latin America to help them do that locally in their own church. So let me introduce some people that you may recognize through the last couple years, that and maybe some trip, or at least one trip that you've had. This is Alex and Lorena Soto, and this picture goes way, way back. And I don't even know how many years now. 10 years, I guess, at least. And we knew Alex and Lorena since they were teenagers, getting to know one another, going through their courtship, and eventually getting married, and now they have 2 young children. And your church went there, 2 years ago? yeah, about 2 years ago, and helped with a building project and some other things. And we bring them up because we still, we went to Nicaragua several years ago, and then we made this move to Ecuador in 2018. But we have still stayed connected with everything that's going on in Nicaragua. And so one of the things that we want to point out is what is happening in these different countries. So Alex and Lorena were the very first people sent from their church in Nicaragua to go as international missionary interns. Or in other words, they were pursuing what it was to be a church planter / missionary. They left Nicaragua and came to Ecuador for about 1 year to observe and learn and grow and study and be equipped as missionaries in a different country, in a different culture. Now, maybe you think, well, these are both Spanish-speaking countries. It's Latin America. How hard could it be, right? And you think, well, what would the big deal be of going from New York to Florida, right? Or Canada to the U.S. or things like that, right? But these are very different countries. There's a whole idea out there, a whole teaching out there that compares hot culture countries versus cold culture countries. What would New York be? Would that be cold culture or hot culture? Cold culture, right? Because it's cold outside right now, right? But that affects people in several different ways. Cold culture is generally more formal, right? More close examples. When we were in Nicaragua, this would literally happen on a weekly, if not daily basis, where Irena was preparing dinner and we'd have a knock at the door and we're kind of setting the table. There was 8 of us, so we're putting 8 plates and settings around. There'd be a knock at the door, and we'd answer it, and someone would come in, a couple or a family or whoever it would be, and we'd talk for a little bit, waiting to find out what are they looking for, what do they want, and they're staying, and dinner's just about ready. So we're going to set a couple more plates, and then there's another knock at the door. Someone else comes in, and they're staying, no intentions of leaving anytime soon. So we put a couple more plates, and then there's another knock at the door. And this would happen. We'd have 2 or 3 families just show up, like, hey, we thought we'd come over and say hi. Then we moved to Ecuador, right? So that's hot culture, hot climate culture. We moved to Ecuador. Now we're going from sea level in Nicaragua to about 9,000 feet in elevation in Ecuador. This is cold culture. You think, oh, Ecuador, you're on the equator, it's hot. If you go down to the coast on the beach, it's hot down there, right? But in the mountains, it's cooler, very, very much cooler, where people are wearing sweaters. They'll wear hat and scarves and gloves, and there's no heat in any of the houses or buildings, and so you show up to Bible study or a visit to someone, and you keep your hat and scarves and mittens on because people are cold. And so we get to Ecuador, and we're trying to get to know people and invite people over, and we're realizing we have to make an appointment like 2 weeks out. To invite someone to come over for a cup of coffee or a dinner or whatever, you've got to make it so we're going from just show up, very informal, to very formal, right? Very, very much more closed in this culture. So what does that mean for Alex and Lorena? Coming from a hot culture climate to a new culture. One that, so you've heard of this term culture shock. There's this culture shock that happens. And so often what we do in sending missionaries Good. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Just stick it in my pocket. Do you have that wire? Just put it in my pocket. It was on the handed it to me. Oh, it's here. There we go. Okay, so this is 2020. The people, the group of people asked, would you help us, lead us, plant this church? And so we began evaluating, setting out a strategic plan. This is part of what we still do in this connection back with Nicaragua. And so we said, let's start all over again, right? And so you may have seen pictures from before that they started meeting under trees and people's side yards and whatever. They kept outgrowing where they were, and eventually God provided a piece of property for them to purchase and then build. And then you guys went and helped with what? I forget now. Okay, for those cabins or for the pavilion? Pavilion. Were you on that trip? Okay, all right. So the pavilion. So I was there months ago. They were finishing, or almost a year ago now. They were finishing that up. Yeah. So I don't have all the pictures, but you'll have. I think probably if you get on their Facebook page or something, you could see some of that. So the idea is not just to plant a church. Here's what the concept that we, I think, have fallen short in sending North American missionaries. We go to plant a church. We try to get that stable, and they would say, if you get the man and the money, then like that pastor, get the man and the money, then they're good to go, and you move on to the next church. Well, we've tried to approach this a little bit differently, where we've said it's more than just planting the church. It's about planting a reproducing church, right? A church that continues to multiply, that continues to prepare people and send them out. And so one of the things that this church plant has focused on is to put everything in place that they can continue to host interns, train them, equip them, and see them go on in ministry as well. So Alex has brought a couple of guys and their wives alongside them, and has been pouring into them over the last couple of years. And the idea is that these two guys are going to stay there and pastor. This is David and Ariel, and they are going to continue to lead this church going forward. And then Alex and a couple of interns are going to go on basically on the other side of the city and focus on planting another church, hopefully in the next year or so. So this is Ruben. This is another intern. You guys probably met him there too. No, was he? Maybe he hadn't started yet. Martin, yeah. So Martin was just finishing up his internship, or has just finished up his internship now, and Ruben is going into another year another level that we would call a residency, focusing more on pastoral, a pastoral focus. Well, so we always have fun when we get together too. Alex and I are very good friends that go way back, and so it's been a joy to see what the Lord has done in their lives, which I went too fast. One of the things that we do, you see this term here called cross-pollination. So I go back to Nicaragua at least once a year, maybe a couple times, to help with different things, just kind of seeing how things are going, laying out the strategies going forward, encouraging with the family, accountability, all these kinds of things. We're on regular calls. You'll see a picture that refers to that later as well. But in constant communication. And then we like to have other people come to Ecuador or wherever we might be working. So Alex has come back to Ecuador a couple different times. One to help with a missions conference, to be a speaker at a missions conference. The very first missions conference that we got a couple of churches together. Very first one they ever had. And then one of the things we do too is to help connect churches like yours to the work in Nicaragua. And so this church was exploring what is this going to look like, what are the opportunities and needs, and so they're looking at this next step of planting the next church. How can they be a part of that? And so they sent a small team down just to kind of scout out. And you can see, was the building painted when you were there? Yeah. Was it? Okay. So there was some painting that had happened at some point. They did some painting, some other painting as well. But that's part of what we will continue to do, is to connect people. We're showing Nicaragua, but this is true in Ecuador as well. Connecting churches from North America and partnering them together, like your church, partnering together with what is happening around the world. So let's make a move to Ecuador now. This is Stalin. Stalin was raised in the church that we were working with locally and specifically, where we attended regularly on a Sunday or through the week. He and his wife were raised in that church, came up through youth group, and then he went through the training, same training that Alex and Lorena did, through servant leaders partnering with the church. And then they went out as church planters into a very rural area of Ecuador. This is up in the mountains, very agricultural, rural part of Ecuador. It's a small town where people live in town and they go out to their farms. A lot of blackberries and corn and things like that, right? It's a very rural area of Ecuador. So this is what we would refer to as regional missions. So we want to look at this through the lens of an Ecuadorian church or a Nicaraguan church. Not of you sending the Doyles to Ecuador, but then helping the church in Ecuador to send missionaries. So this is now a church in Ecuador who has sent someone regionally to a rural area of Ecuador to help plant a church there. So we helped, we brought another church in from New York. This is in Sodus. This church here is from Sodus, New York. They came down to Ecuador this last summer to help with the very first vacation Bible school that they'd had in this church plant. And we had a great time just getting the kids together and making connections, more connections in the community. They have about 50 people on a Sunday morning at this church plant now. And Stalin and Jessica are doing a fantastic job leading that work. So this picture here represents actually 3 churches. One is the church plant where the ministry was happening. The other is the sending church in Quito, Ecuador, where we were working. That church is led by Darwin, the Pastor Darwin. He's in the wheelchair. If you see the guy sitting down in the wheelchair there, his daughter's sitting on his lap, and his wife is just to his right. I guess it is just behind the daughter. And so a small group came from the sending church and then the church in Sodus. So this was a collaborative effort of bringing 3 churches together to help accomplish the VBS and some other relationship building that week. The young lady in this picture, her name is Cristina. She's Ecuadorian. Her family went to Spain when she was a young girl, and she graduated high school in Spain, then came back to Ecuador after she graduated high school to study dentistry in college. While she was studying in the university, she came to know Christ. She had never known anything about Christ before that. Growing up in Spain, Europe is a whole nother story, right? Of kind of being postmodern, post-Christian. But she came back to Ecuador, came to know Christ, finished her studying on her dentistry track there. And at the same time that she was doing the studies for dentistry, she was also studying with servant leaders material and internship, going through that with her local church that we were working with. She also, at the same time, completed the biblical counseling through Lafayette, Indiana, the ACBC training that they do out there, and had this desire to go back to Spain with the gospel and establish the counseling ministry over there, connecting with a local church in Spain. And so her church in Cuenca, Ecuador, sent her as the very first missionary they'd ever sent. She left, I think, this last August. I think August is when she left. August of 2024. So now we see local missions. Remember, through the eyes of an Ecuadorian church or Latin American church, we have local missions, regional missions. Stalin and Jessica going to this about 5 hours outside of where their home church is, and now international missions, as we see Christina being sent out to Spain, back living with her mom, who has since come to know Christ also. She's able to live with her mom. So there's some factors there that are unusual of a missionary going out. She's actually able to go back and have some housing, because Europe is very expensive, right, for a Latina to go over there. But God has provided for her to be there, and we're excited about what he's going to do through Christina as she settles in there. All right, so I tell people we go out not just with the gospel of Jesus Christ, but I say the gospel of the Buffalo Bills too. So if you know me, you know I'm a Bills fan, and Ecuadorians they have not really understood American football. That's what they call it, American football, but they like the violence of it. So they said, we want to watch it, we want to try to play it. So we've had some gatherings like fellowships or whatever. We'll have lunch and then play football, our version of football. But we've gotten some people together through the last couple of years, and I've paused the games and said, okay, you have 4 opportunities. You got to get a first down. The ultimate goal is to get a touchdown. Okay, this is a penalty, and this is the quarterback. He hands it off to the running. All these kinds of things, right? So now there's a few guys that understand enough about football, and they enjoy sitting down with us to watch it. But why do I talk about that? It's not just football. It's relationship building stuff, right? That you're passing time with people, doing something fun, whether it's watching a game or playing football, or these are super competitive people. Super competitive people. So when we play our version of football, it's violent. It's just violent. It's the only way to say it. Like there's tackling that happens. It's guys and girls playing at the same time, but it's guys versus guys, girls versus girls, and it's lowering the shoulder, taking someone to the ground, trying to rip the football out. All this. I remember the pastor's wife had got the ball, and she's running down the field toward our end. Eyes are just like bulging. She's on a mission, right? And there's nothing I can do because I'm a guy. She's a girl running, so you can only get in the way. But there's some pretty violent tackling. But the whole purpose is not to teach football, but to have some time together, build relationships, and then ministry is built off of relationships. So I'm just trying to give you a little philosophy of ministry, some insight into that. These relationships then turn into planning meetings, right? Laying out strategy. This picture represents Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Ecuador. The people being in this picture as we're laying out how can we further the kingdom? How can we further the gospel through what is happening through these churches? How can we help one another and walk together on mission? So we're thankful for how God has allowed us to do that. And then this is, I mentioned the weekly calls, or if you look at my phone, you'll see text and voice messages and phone calls, and then weekly I'm on a couple different calls like this of connecting with the teammates that we have around the world. From this picture here is just of Latin America, and then we have our English-speaking group as well from Europe and U.S. and so forth. All right, before I get to the next picture, anyone here a Starbucks fan? Like Starbucks coffee? I see a couple hands. I see a couple of head shakes. Like, no. I don't like to pay $5 or more for a cup of coffee. That's my gripe about Starbucks. But Eva works for Starbucks, so I like to give her a hard time about that. But then we went to Costa Rica this last summer, or I guess almost 2 years, a year and a half ago now. And I saw this commercial come on as I'm watching football over the last few months here. This commercial would come on, and it would say Alsacia. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to that, but if you watch TV and you see a Starbucks commercial come on, pay attention right at the very beginning. It'll say Alsacia, and that is a coffee farm in Costa Rica, which we went out of our way to go to just because it's Starbucks in Costa Rica. And if you look up at the top above that waterfall, there are coffee plants there. This is the only Starbucks store in the entire world that uses its own coffee beans from this farm. Everywhere else, they just get coffee beans from wherever, right? That's a whole other story. But why are we in Costa Rica? Oh, well, it's way back up on top, right on the ridge. It's kind of hard to see from way back here. Yeah. Right up, there's the waterfall and the tree line, and above the tree line, it's still green, right? But right up on the ridge, you can kind of see some rows, and those are coffee plants up there. Yeah. So why were we there? Well, every couple of years, again, we have this focus of bringing missions before the Latin American church. That missions is not just about receiving missionaries, it's about equipping and sending missionaries. So every 2 years, we host what we call Ethnos Missions Academy. This is not Ethnos 360, which used to be New Tribes. This is a servant leaders ministry that we partner with churches to be able to bring young people, high school to college age, together every couple of years to understand what missions is all about, to have an international experience for about 1 week. We have training. This is not the typical missions trip where you're going to mix concrete or dig a ditch or paint a wall. There's some projects that happen as well. But we're doing training through this time about culture and the gospel, about syncretism and how that has affected Christian missions going overseas or going internationally. And so we have an opportunity to bring young people together, to keep missions in front of the church through their young people coming and pursuing that. So this 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, it was in Costa Rica, and Annika came for that. Annika has actually been at every single Ethnos Missions Academy that we've had. This was the third one, right? So the first one, if you remember, was 6 years ago now, I guess it was, 2019, almost 6 years ago, in Germany. And Eva and Annika went with me to that, and I was able to do some teaching there. And then the next one was in Ecuador. We had just gotten back after, so people were still wearing masks and things like that, right? This was 2021. And then 2023 was in Costa Rica. And this next one will be this coming summer in July. I don't remember the exact dates, but it'll be back in Ecuador again. So if you have a young person that's interested in missions, that have been praying about missions, this is a great opportunity to come rub shoulders with church planters, missionaries, people from other countries, and understand more about missions. These are some of the people that we work with in Ecuador. There's a couple other countries represented there as well. But we are able to get people together again for encouragement, for accountability. These are some pastors that just need people to walk alongside them as they are leading different ministries as well. This is Alex. Remember I mentioned about him coming back to Ecuador for a missions conference, and we're excited to be able to do that very first missions conference that these two churches have ever had, and that he was able to come back for that. And then we had to include Emmanuel in one of our pictures here. This was this last summer. He came back with us, and Eva, of course, for another week of ministry at the church that we were working with. And so this was going to get some gelato. You guys have had gelato, right? This is not ice cream. We're talking about gelato. These are the perks of things you look forward to when you're on the mission field. All right, last picture here, and then we'll give a couple of details, and we'll have hopefully some time for some questions, a few minutes for questions. This is the last Sunday where our church gathered around. This is the church that we worked with over the last 3 years, where they prayed for us as we were coming back to the U.S. Why have we come back to the U.S.? If you've gotten our update, you've seen that, but for those that don't get the emails or have been on the website, our girls came back 2.5 years ago, altitude headaches. So we started exploring what's the next step, what are we going to do? And so Eva and Annika came back together about 2.5 years ago, and the next step for them was to go into the Bible Institute. That was a good transition for them as a third culture kid to come back into the U.S. and adjust back. There was some pretty hard times over that first year, and then the next year Audra came back as well. And we have always tried to have a focus, and where, as they say, where the rubber meets the road, to prioritize family. In other words, the decisions that we make, the things that we do, what is best for our family, right? And so our family is our first ministry. Missions and church planting and all of that is secondary to that. And so they're coming into this time right now where what's next? No place to live. Where do we go? How do we launch from here? And so we said we need to come back and provide this base for our family, that they can be able to take next steps from this point on. And so we said first thing that we're making a decision on was to come back to the U.S. The second thing would be, okay, what's next? What does ministry look like from here going forward? So we've had some opportunities come up that we were praying through over the last several months. Do we make a shift? Is God leading us in a different direction? Or would we ultimately, we just shorten it this way, that we believe that God was keeping us in missions? And what did that look like? So servant leader said, listen, we're looking for someone who will continue to lead the trainings and internships in Latin America and expand new opportunities for those trainings with churches that want to do that. Would you be willing to lead that for us? Would you be willing to lead what's going on in Ecuador and Nicaragua as well? And so we said, well, we've built these relationships over the last decade or more now, and God has given us this opportunity to continue to lead those efforts and continue to bring these partnerships together between North America and Latin America. And so just a month or so ago, we were able to confirm all of those things with our home church, with servant leaders, and we're praying that God will continue to open those doors for us. So where does that leave us now? Well, in a transition like that, coming back to the States, we've had several supporters, churches or individuals say, well, things have changed for them and because of us or whatever it might be. And so that leaves us with a support need of a couple $1,000. One of the things to pray for is the future of our daughter. As you can see, there's guys in the picture now. There's wedding bells on the horizon, we imagine. And so pray for all of those things. No pressure, Manuel. And then next thing for us as a family to be able to travel to Latin America easier is to be based out of Florida. So we're looking for housing down there to be able to make that trip easier. So where we end at quarter of, right? We have 5 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. So let me stop there, all my rambling and so forth, and maybe open it up for some questions if you have those. Syncretism. Let me give a little illustration. I'll try to keep this real short. In Ecuador, there was a tribal people hundreds of years ago called the Cañar people, and they worshipped the moon. And then they were conquered by, you may know, the Incas. The Incas worshipped the sun. So the Cañar had their temple to the moon. The Incas came in and said, well, we're not going to totally destroy your culture and gods and worship and all of that. You can keep your temple to the moon. We'll build our temple to the sun god over here and worship. And so worshiping man, there's lots to tell about that. Anyway, because they understood seasons and everything, there's lots to tell. And you can go visit the ruins in Ecuador. And then eventually the Spaniards came in with Catholicism and conquered the Incas, right? So you can go through the Catholic Church or churches, cathedrals and so forth in Ecuador or lots of Latin America, and you'll see things like this. You'll see the moon and some of the things in there, like if you look at stained glass windows or whatever it might be, see the moon, you'll see the sun, right? And so they say, well, because at first they try to conquer, no, you have to be one of us, you have to be Catholic, and there was this resistance, right? And so when they said, well, fine, keep your sun, keep your moon, and be Catholic. And so what does that mean for us? We have to be careful with the gospel, right? That we just don't accept anyone and everyone and everything, that it can all be the same, we can just sync up, right? That we're very clear that he is the only way, the truth, and the life, right? So that's the idea of syncretism. Question. Somebody else? Yeah. So one of the things is just the continuing conversations mostly the guys, right? Because they're planting churches, laying out what the plans and strategies are for them in church planting. Follow up with that accountability. Sometimes it's just there's accountability and encouragement that's needed on building those relationships on a weekly basis. Another side of it is building partnerships, right? So this was a fairly simple and easy when we came here 3 years ago, whatever it was. We said, hey, we're looking to support a national, and boom, like, hey, well, here's an opportunity. But sometimes it's arranging someone to, hey, come meet Stalin, come meet Darwin, come meet Pepe, or whoever it might be. There's other people that we were not able to include their specific picture in here. So it's me kind of being that bridge of introducing the North American church with a Latin American church or church planter, missionary. Say, hey, let's, and every partnership may look different, right? Not everyone's going to go to Nicaragua. Not everyone's going to support monthly. Maybe it's a project or all kinds of different things. But what does a partnership look like? How can this look like between your church a Latin American church, but building those bridges. So it would seek to be the bridge. So it's visiting, representing those kinds of things, the churches and pastors as well, this side. And then ongoing training. Training happens online as well as in person, so it's going courses or classes that happen through the week. We have 10-week courses or modules that go through that. So these are students plugging in from all over Latin America into those courses as well. Somebody else? Getting as clear as mud. Yes, sir. Yeah. That was an old mission, an old Catholic mission. I can go back to that. I don't remember the name of it. That was an old Catholic mission that was damaged in Costa Rica in an earthquake. And so it's a historical site now that they try to preserve it the best they can. You can go in, you can go through that doorway and all of that, but there's no, I mean, it's just ruins now, but it's an old Catholic mission. Somebody else have, do you have another one? It's pretty difficult, and probably is going to get more difficult now to try to get someone from Latin America up to there. We have some that have visas, and they've had them from years ago or whatever. But it's difficult. So the best scenario is to try to arrange North Americans to go there for a visit and meet them. We're going to try it still at different times. We'll see. Tim and I have talked a little bit strategies that we can pursue to see if we can make something happen. But we've tried a couple of different times, and it's fallen through both times with different ones. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to make us late for the next service. It's about quarter of now. So just end by saying thank you for the opportunity to share and for your support and encouragement and love over the years. It's always a joy and a pleasure to come back and be able to share with you what God is doing around the world. And so we want to say thank you, each one of you.